Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, and whatever other names people hang on me, your chancellor of cheerfulness. By the way, none of them are wrong. I'll cop to all of them. And of course, gotta go with this. Your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett. And welcome back. Skipped a day. It's been a long time since I skipped a day. But we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Gentle beings, kind souls, aliens, all kinds of people from across the 28 known galaxies. Welcome to Robservations, episode number 421. My God, I can't believe we're here. There's so much going on today. There's so much craziness and wackiness. First of all, I just want to start and say YouTube's playing shenanigans with a lot of YouTube creators. Obviously, they have what's called a super chat feature. You guys are very generous by supporting the channel by sending in super chats, which they take 30% of off the top. So if you send me $1, I get 70 cents. But for whatever reason, today, those super chats are disappearing. They're not showing up on any external ways to chart those things. It's very weird. I don't know what's going on. I've been trying to keep all your super chats in order. People have sent me in a lot. I've been keeping track of them, so I will get to them. I don't want to discourage anybody from sending them in, but if you want, you can go to Streamlabs. There's a link, Stream Elements. There's a link below where you can participate in the live chat by doing that. I don't know what's going on. It's very strange. It was made. It was brought to my attention by John Campea this morning on our show. There's lots of wackiness going on. I even heard that somebody is trying to use super chats as a way to launder money. That's some weird internet thing. I don't know. I don't know how you would do that. They take 30% of your money. So not exactly the best way. I'd prefer to make films. So if any drug cartels want to have me launder money for them, just give me a budget for another film. I'll take care of you. I say that with tongue firmly in cheek. I'm just kidding. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, today there was some monumental news dropped. And I think in a way, first of all, everybody in the fan community, I would like to give anybody who has supported the idea of Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League, release the Snyder cut, hashtag release the Snyder cut. All of you deserve a clap. So everybody, join me. Well done, fandom. For once, fandom might get it right. And everybody, I've gone back and forth with people on Twitter for a long time. Now, I'm not going to be one of those Johnny-come-latelys that jump on a bandwagon. I would just like to point out that I have been supporting Zack Snyder's Man of Steel and the ultimate cut of Batman v Superman. I have defended for years. You can see all of this commentary on whether it's Collider Heroes or whether it's the John Campea show or whether it's this show. I have even said that I was poised to eviscerate Mr. Zack Snyder because he remade one of my favorite, not just horror films, favorite movies of all time, George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. I know James Gunn wrote it, but man, I was poised to hate a movie in my life. I walked in seething with anger, furious anger, and I was ready to hate Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, and I walked out and I was like, you know what? That was pretty good. I liked it. So, Zack Snyder has done things that I've liked more than others. I did buy the hot toys from Sucker Punch, but I was not a fan. Watchmen, I think Watchmen is a really interesting, slavish recreation to the graphic novel that I love, one of my favorite things in the world. I don't love the movie. I don't think it's a great adaptation. But, and this goes into the conversation we're going to have today, he did make 3 different versions of that film that were released on home video. the theatrical version, the director's cut, and the ultimate edition, which includes the animated Tales of the Black Freighter sequences, which I was like, it doesn't really work if you really think about why those were included in the comic, but okay. I have them all. They're all very interesting. I have been a staunch defender of Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. I thought it was a great first contact science fiction film. Anybody who's a Superman fan, or anybody who is a DC Comics fan, or anybody who's at all a fan of the entire medium of comics understands Elseworld stories. They understand different takes on the character. So I grew up, I love Superman. I've loved Superman my whole life, but I have been seeing different incarnations or versions of the character. I am not married to any version of Superman. Remember, if you go back to his origins, Superman couldn't fly. He was kind of a dick, as was pointed out in a letter on my show the other day. It was a very different character that's evolved over the years. So Superman, in my mind, has always gone through an evolution. And in my life, in terms of film, 1978, when I saw Superman, the movie, for the first time, I was 10, 11. Blew my mind. I loved it. I still love it. The Superman Christopher Reeve hot toy is one of my favorites. So, various incarnations of Superman. I mean, in Superman 3, we got the evil Superman. So, I am not married to any depiction of the character. I mean, if you go to the Superman animated series that followed in the wake of Batman, the animated series, love that. Loved Superman in Justice League. I've loved all different kinds of versions of Superman. I guess that's why I loved Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. I thought Man of Steel was an interesting take. It was a realistic take, and ironically, I was on the Outlaws show, John Roca's show last night, and he was explaining to me why he loved modern Star Trek, Discovery and Picard, and I have to say, I was fascinated by his explanation because I hadn't heard it. And basically, he liked the fact that he was seeing Star Trek filtered through the lens of today as opposed to this optimistic lens of the 60s. It was interesting. So when I saw Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, I enjoyed its science fiction take on Krypton. I liked the realistic take. If Superman... And by the way, I have to say, a Rob theory, a Robservation, if you will, about modern superhero films, is I think the great success in modern superhero movies that began with Bryan Singer's X-Men is that we want to believe that superheroes exist in our world today. Like the MCU or the DC universe, if you look outside your window, when we see superheroes in movies, we want to believe that that's what we would see outside our window. If those characters existed, that's how we would see them. I think that's part of the great success of the MCU. And one of the things I loved about Man of Steel was after Nolan's Batman movies, where Batman was firmly set in our world, where Bane can shoot up a stock exchange and make Bruce Wayne go broke. I thought that was really interesting about Man of Steel. Superman didn't know who he was. He came into his powers later, as he grew older. I liked it. And for everyone who talked about, well, Superman doesn't kill, I've never understood that. It's not whether Superman kills or not. It's whether Superman wants to kill, which he does not. But in the many conflicts that he finds himself in, most especially the Kryptonians that we see in Man of Steel, he was given no choice. He stopped an extinction event. It's not like he had an opportunity to spare. General Zod, it was him or it was Superman or Zod. Superman didn't want to kill. But in the real world, if you have superheroes and supervillains, and you're dealing with extinction level events, someone's going to die. So that argument has never flown with me. I loved Man of Steel for what it was. Now, you have all these different versions of Superman, but in Zack Snyder's vision of the world with a Superman, beginning with an awesome sci-fi Krypton, I'm like, okay, what do you do when you deal with somebody who can exterminate every human being on the planet? There was no chance Zod was going to be locked into jail or put in the Phantom Zone. He was a dead man. A dead man. So I like Man of Steel. I was excited for Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. I wanted to see Batman and Wonder Woman. Let me just say, when I was a kid, my favorite thing in the world was the Justice League of America. My mom went to Spindle Racks and bought me every issue of Justice League. But I'm talking early Justice League. When I started collecting Justice League, they were about the original Volume 1 around issue 90. Like, one of my favorite comics to this day is the giant-sized Justice League 114, where it was reprinting the stories from, I think they were Gardner Fox stories, about Earth 3. For those of you who might doubt how much I love Justice League or Superman or Man of Steel, I would like to point out, next to George Lucas here, who we'll get to soon, this box here is the Crisis, pardon me, wrong camera, Crisis on Infinite Earths box set that they released for the anniversary. And if I open it up, these are some of the reprints. Actually, hang on, let me change the camera lens. Let me just I'm buying myself credibility. Part of this box set, these are all Crisis on Infinite Earths hardcovers, but they have many reprints of these old Justice League comics. Crisis on Earth 1. I cannot tell you how much I loved the Justice League growing up, starting with the hour-long Super Friends cartoon, which I loved. So I'm a huge Justice League fan. Since I was a little kid, I've wanted to see a Justice League movie. And who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? So I loved Man of Steel, and I couldn't wait to see Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. Now, I thought the theatrical version of that film was a mess, to be honest. I thought it was overstuffed. The idea you had to include, well, Batman and Wonder Woman and Doomsday. But I loved Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. I loved the tone of it. And I have to say, Zack Snyder has slavishly recreated comic book panels that I've wanted to see. And he's obviously been hugely influenced by Alex Ross's work. And I thought that Batman v Superman, the Ultimate Edition that finally came out on disc, it had things I didn't like Gotham City and Metropolis across the river from or the bay from one another. I thought that was strange. The idea that Clark Kent had never gone to Gotham. I mean, with Batman over there, he never was curious and just one night said, I'm going to go check out the next giant metropolis next to us. I thought that was all very silly. However, the apocalypse dream, the idea of Darkseid and all that, which made no sense in the context of the film. I don't even know why it was included. I was looking forward to the New Gods. I was looking forward to what Zack Snyder would do, recreate all of this material. I was stoked to see it. And Batman v Superman, again, the theatrical version left me cold, but I loved the feel of the movie, if that makes sense, especially the Ultimate Edition. Despite the fact there's a lot I didn't like and Superman seems to get the short shrift in the film, there was a feeling to it. There was a mythic quality that Snyder, through his visuals, brought to the film. And also Man of Steel. The flying scenes in Man of Steel. And I really responded to that, like an Alex Ross painting. And I thought that's really interesting in his ability to bring comic panels to life. I thought that there was a mythic quality that was very different than the MCU. Very different, which I really liked. The movie, again, why did you have to have Doomsday? Why did Superman have to die? I mean, all these things were strange to me. I understand, but it was like, okay. But I love the tone of it. So, the idea that Zack Snyder would continue on and make Justice League, I was excited about, because I was excited to see a Justice League movie with that mythic Alex Ross tonality of these characters. I mean, the way Alex Ross painted those characters is I bought a $1,200 Alex Ross Justice League Jaclay, I don't know, 15 years ago at Comic-Con, which I love. Still have it. It's great. And I love the fact that he was aspiring to create those images. Then, I won't rehash it, but of course we all know that Zack Snyder's vision for Justice League was not realized. And the movie that came out may just be one of the most disappointing cinematic experiences that I've ever had. Ever had. I was crushed. The opening scene, the cell phone footage of Henry Cavill, they brought him back. I mean, we all know that Zack Snyder's Justice League was shot. It was all shot. There were two movies at Warner Brothers under the former regime, the non-Toby Emmerich, non-Walter Hamada regime at Warner Brothers, that the two movies that suffered the most, which are, in my mind, both of them are god-awful. And they are perfect examples of where a studio and executives and how corporate culture goes monumentally wrong. First being Suicide Squad, a hot mess. A movie, probably the worst big-budget editing job I've ever seen in a film. Because why? They hired trailer companies to do it? Like, what? Like, that is only a decision an executive, a higher-up could make, not understanding one iota of the work that goes into editing a movie. Well, let's just get we'll get one of those trailer companies who cuts kick-ass trailers to come in and cut the film. As if, like, editing is just universal. Cutting narrative is exactly the same as cutting music videos or trailers. Spoiler alert, no, it's not. So we got the hot mess that is Suicide Squad. But hey, it made almost $700 million domestic, so it was a big thing, right? Great, good for them. The other was, of course, Justice League, where they're looking around at other studios. Well, the MCU, the Avengers are making money. We have to bring the mirth in, and we have to make it, funny, and blah, 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 blah. So in midstream, I understand Zack Snyder and his wife had a horrible tragedy in their family. But all of what happened to Justice League was in the works before that. And it was studio executives were being pressured to come up with the exact same kind of money that Avengers movies were coming up with. And Snyder, who, by the way, had done right by the studio, he really had. And yet his movies weren't making as much. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice almost made $900 million, but they just assumed it was $1 billion movie, and they did spend $450 million on it or something. Who knows? I'm not sure, but it was considered a disappointment. So the executives are second guessing themselves. Oh gosh, way to support your filmmaker who's been working for you for almost a decade now. They basically threw him under the bus. Let's hire Joss Whedon. From a corporate standpoint, a spreadsheet standpoint, the man made Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron, so why not bring him over? He's a fan favorite. But he was hamstrung from the beginning. Anyway, we all know that Zack Snyder's Justice League, even though he has his name on it as director, did not see the light of day. I was as disappointed as anyone else. As a matter of fact, I hate Justice League. I buy all kinds of movies on physical media. I did not buy Justice League. I hated it that much. I've been buying the Hot Toys, truth be told. I have the Justice League Hot Toys. I really liked the characters. And I really wish maybe this will inspire Hot Toys to make a cyborg figure, because I don't want them to be shortchanged. I would love to buy one. I'll pre-order it now. But anyway, so this idea that Zack Snyder's... And by the way, we know from promotional materials there was a lot more that was shot for Justice League that we didn't see. Leading up to the release of the film, there was all kinds of material that we never saw that was in their promotional material that you can cut together. It's on YouTube. You can look for it. It was clear that the movie we got was not the movie Zack Snyder was making. So, with everyone's disappointment, this idea of the Snyder Cut, release the Snyder Cut. Now, I've talked about that a lot on Heroes, on the John Campea show, on my own show. Now, here's my thing about fan blathering. My problem with fan blathering is that fans have little to no understanding of the business of Hollywood. So when they start talking about what they want, can you do this, can you do that, they really don't understand how things happen in Hollywood. And first and foremost is money and contracts and all of that. So for the Snyder Cut of Justice League, if you're ever going to make one, there are a number of obstacles. First of all, Zack Snyder was nowhere near finishing his film the way we think of a finished film. People are like, no, there was an assembly cut, so-and-so saw it, and blah, blah, blah. All of that, having assembly cuts and cuts of your movie, that is the process of editorial. As a post-production supervisor and editor myself, I can tell you that until a movie's done, it's not done. There's all kinds of things that need to be finished. Lots of things that cost a lot of money. Zack Snyder never had any cut of Justice League that was anywhere near being complete. I've said many times, I even talked money. I said $20 or $30 million, if not more. Well, that was proven correct. Me, the Oracle of Delphi of the fan community when it comes to Hollywood, just want to say that. But I was always like, all of this blathering about release the Snyder Cut, they already released a Justice League. And what people don't understand is that studios are bound by their guild contracts. All studios subscribe to union rules. And there are many unions that govern Hollywood. There's IATSE, there's basically the Teamsters. There is the Writers Guild of America. There is the Directors Guild of America. There's the Producers Guild of America. There's the Costume Designers. Everybody has a guild, and all major motion pictures studios are bound. They're all guild signatories. So you can't just do stuff and not have it cost you money. The actors in a movie, the movie was released, and the actors have many, many pages-long contracts that talk about sequels and merchandising and likeness approval. And that's true of every actor. Some actors, if you're a lead role, Henry Cavill's coming back. Ben Affleck, who's already an Oscar-winning director, is playing Batman already for the second time, or actually the third time, or whatever. I mean, he's got a contract. Everybody's got a contract. Their lawyers, their managers, their agents all have a say. But the real question about making a Snyder Cut of Justice League is one of money. Let's say you got all the legalities taken care of. Who's going to pay for it? Now, all of you people that think, hey, studios are sitting on just like vast reserves of cash. No, they are not. Movies that get made in the tentpole property world are all made with borrowed money. You know why you see all those production companies at the beginning of movies? Well, they put in money. They guarantee certain things. But most of the time, and with those guarantors, the studios are borrowing money. If a movie costs $250 million, they're not paying for it. They're borrowing the money from a bank, which means they incur interest fees and all of that. And as somebody who worked in feature production, which I did, admittedly a long time ago, but I worked in feature production at Warner Brothers. My first job in the industry, my first real job, I was the art department production assistant on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, not the one with Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger. It was the Leatherface. It was the one before that, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. I worked for Bill Young, the senior vice president of physical production at Warner Brothers, which means our department oversaw the physical production of all of the movies that Warner Brothers made. So I know a little something about how studio movie making works. Again, I was a management trainee. I was a young whippersnapper, very young, just beginning my career. But I used to read everything I could get my hands on. So I have a little bit of an understanding of how films are made. The thing about the Snyder Cut was, I knew that there's tens of millions of dollars to be spent when it comes to the Snyder Cut. Where is it going to come from? Who is going to pay for this? And this is something I have talked about online. You can go back and find every appearance. There will be people, you can go on my Twitter feed and search when I've talked about the Snyder Cut. Mostly it comes down to, you people are high. I appreciate that everybody wants the Snyder Cut. You guys don't understand. It's not nearly close to being finished. It requires tens of millions of dollars to complete. And you guys don't even understand. You don't want to see an assembly cut. What you want is a finished movie. I can tell you that. Everyone's like, well, even John Campea was saying, wow, just release the version as it exists now. No. You've all watched deleted scenes on Blu-rays or 4Ks or whatever, and you've seen unfinished effects. Don't you tell me that you would be willing to watch an entire movie that was full of that same thing. Nobody wants that. Everybody wants a finished movie. There was no finished Snyder Cut. There was nothing close to a finished Snyder Cut of Justice League. There was tens of millions of dollars to be done, work to be done. Who would pay for that? Now, people are like, wow, the studio should just pay for that. Really? No, because the only way you're going to make a movie is a commodity. It's a product to be bought and sold. How do you justify spending 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or however many millions of dollars it would cost? Where do you get that money? But more importantly, where are you going to get it back? Remember, the conventional wisdom is that a studio needs to get 3 times what it spent to break even. So let's say a Snyder Cut costs $30 million to finish. That means it needs to have $90 to $100 million to break even, to justify the $30 million you're spending. Where's that going to come from? First of all, where's the $30 million going to come from? And then how do you justify it? How do you get the $100 million back? And unless you can account for that $100 million, you cannot justify the $30 million to spend. So that's what I would argue. Back and forth on social media, people would tell me, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, I did fucking work in a movie studio for the senior vice president of feature film production. So I know a little bit about it. More than you. I don't know as much as, say, my boss did. But at least, I got to go into a room where David Lean was with his Nostromo script that Robert Bolt wrote. I was told not to copy one for myself, but I did. I'm just saying. So anyway, but I would go on back and forth on Twitter with people, and the question I would always ask is, who's going to pay for it? And how are they going to get reimbursed? How are they going to make money? Well, ladies and gentlemen, Warner Brothers is entering the streaming wars. HBO Max. And as everyone knows, how do you win the streaming wars? With content. Content is the only way you can win. Have content people want to watch. And we have an insatiable appetite in our binge-worthy world that we live in now. You can binge an entire program in a day. And then you're like, what's for tomorrow? What's for breakfast tomorrow? What's for lunch tomorrow? What can I gobble up? What can I put in my brain? Well, here's another thing that I've brought up many times. When I used to make DVD special features, which I still do, and oh, wait, hang on, allow me to advertise from Scream Factory, a movie I produced for Warner Premiere, their direct-to-video division. A movie I produced is finally coming out on Blu-ray from Scream Factory on June 16th. Look at that. The Hills Run Red, a movie I produced that Joel Silver was the executive producer of. And I just spent my time in sheltering at home making special features with the director of the film, Dave Parker. So there you go. How many YouTubers have a movie coming out again on June 16th? And if you hate the movie, which you can, or you can tell me you hate it after you've seen it, I will direct you to the 6.5 hours of special features we created, brand new for this new release. I mean, come on. If you're not here to tout your own work, what can you do? So anyway, what changed? HBO Max. DVD special features. The millions of dollars that were spent on, say, the Lord of the Rings extended edition or X-Men or Superman Returns or Chronicles of Narnia, all discs that I produced or worked on as a segment producer. Those discs were paid for by the marketing departments of the studio. There's many millions of dollars set aside by the marketing departments to pay for things, to pay for marketing, trailers and promos and whatever they want to do. Well, with HBO Max launching and a bunch of money set aside both for production and marketing, the perfect storm has arisen to pay for the Snyder Cut. I mean, they have a version of the film, right? And before we go any further, why don't we talk about the fact that, yes, the Snyder Cut was announced today on a live stream for Man of Steel, and I even tweeted before it went on. I said, I think if there isn't going to be a Snyder Cut after all the brouhaha, it might be the most disappointing fan moment in fan history since the release of The Phantom Menace. I know. I'm just saying that. I know that people love The Phantom Menace. I know there's people that love the prequels. But anyway, today, the Snyder Cut was announced as a reality. And let's talk about what was actually said and released and what information we can glean from it. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. From mere hours ago, 11 o'clock, a little more than 2 hours ago, this is from Hollywood Reporter, Boris Kitt. It will be an entirely new thing. Zack Snyder's 20 million plus. Go back and look at what I said. 20 million, 30 million. Justice League cut plans revealed. HBO, look at that great, by the way, good thumbnail. HBO Max will debut the project in 2021, possibly in a 4-hour director's cut or in a 6 TV-style chapters as the Helmer gets the gang back together with the original post-production crew to score, cut, and finish visual effects. By the way, all things I said needed to be done. It was very early on a Monday morning in November when director Zack Snyder and his wife, this would be last November of 2019, and his wife and producing partner Deborah Snyder received a call from their agent. Let's be a bit more precise. It was 7 a.m. But more importantly, it was the day after the second anniversary of the release of Justice League, the DC superhero movie that Snyder was forced to exit due to a family emergency, which was then substantially reshot and retooled by replacement director Joss Whedon. In the time since its release, something unusual happened. A growing movement of fans, rallied by the hashtag Release a Snyder Cut, had called, agitated, petitioned, even bought a Times Square billboard and chartered a plane to fly a banner over Comic-Con for Snyder's version to be released. And on the film's second anniversary, the hashtag had its biggest day ever, with even the movie's stars, Gal Gadot and Ben Affleck, adding their voices on Twitter. So here, the morning after, was their agent saying that Toby Emmerich, chairman of Warner Brothers Pictures, was acknowledging the movement and, more importantly, was willing to accede. This is real, he said. People out there want it. Would you guys ever consider doing something, was what Emmerich was asking. Remember, this is November of 2019. Now, for all of you release the Snyder Cut people, now this is an account that was been released to the trades. I understand, but we're talking November 2019. The answer to Emmerich's question, a whispered about secret 4 months, was revealed Wednesday, meaning today, when Zack Snyder confirmed at the end of an online screening of his 2013 movie Man of Steel that his version of Justice League was indeed real, and that it would be coming to HBO Max, the Warner Media digital streaming service, launching May 27th, and is expected to debut in 2021. 2021! This is not a movie that is done. This is a movie that needs a year of post-production. A year. Keep that in mind. Also, remember, this call was in November of 2019, 6 months ago, half a year ago. So, the reason that Zack Snyder has been trolling everyone on social media is because he was leading up to this announcement. He knew it was going to happen. Good on him. It is currently unclear what form of Snyder's Justice League will take, whether it will be released as an almost 4-hour director's cut or split into 6 chapters has yet to be decided. If I might chime in, make it a 4-hour fucking movie. Make it an event. This is an event. Don't split it into TV chapters. This is a movie. Make it 4 hours. Give it an intermission with scored. I mean, go old school. Make this a roadshow version. And by the way, let's not kid ourselves. This has to be released in theaters beforehand. Just saying. Okay, whether it will be released as an almost 4-hour director's cut or split into 6 chapters has yet to be decided, but the Snyders are now in the midst of reassembling much of their original post-production crew to score, cut, and add and finish old visual effects, and yes, maybe bring back many of the actors to record additional dialogue, not to reshoot scenes. To record additional dialogue. It is also unclear as to the cost of this endeavor. One source has pegged the effort in the $20 million range, although another source says that the figure could be closer to $30 million. The parties involved had no comment. I'll tell you what, if they're saying 20 to 30 million, it's $50 million. I mean, I understand, maybe not 50, but let's err on the side of caution. It's $50 million. HBO Max, good bet for them. What they get is a brand new movie. I mean, they're paying a lot more money at Netflix for lesser films. It will be an entirely new thing. And especially talking to those who have seen the release movie, a new experience apart from that movie, Zack Snyder tells The Hollywood Reporter, noting that to this day, Zack Snyder has not watched the version released in theaters. I don't blame him. I can't imagine how painful it would be. You probably saw 1/4 of what I did, the director notes, basing his judgment on what has been shared with him of Whedon's version, which means, and I believe that, it wasn't just footage, it was his entire vision of the film that was dispensed with by a studio that was being reactionary. Cooler heads have prevailed. Toby Emmerich has a great track record presiding over, studios that might have made things like Lord of the Rings, call me crazy. And what did they have? Extended versions. Before Emmerich came calling Ed Snyder, I always thought it was a thing that in 20 years maybe somebody would do a documentary and I could lend them the footage, little snippets of a cut no one has ever seen. But, adds Deborah Snyder, his wife, also producer on the film, with the new platform and streaming services, you can have something like this. You can't release something like this theatrically. Oh, Deborah, but you can. But you could with the streaming service. It's an opportunity that wasn't there 2 years ago, to be honest. It is a very unlikely development and the latest twist for a movie that has, like the Man of Steel himself, seen death and rebirth. Snyder was in a unique position when he shot Justice League in 2016. Warner Brothers had entrusted its universe of DC characters to one filmmaker, him, and he had been building toward a great on-screen team-up, though not without some bumps in the road. He began with Man of Steel, which grossed $668 million worldwide, which was great, but not when you compare it to what Marvel wound up doing. Then followed up with Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, the 2016 blockbuster that polarized fans with its dark take on the iconic titular heroes and took in $873 million globally. If we didn't have a world with the MCU, that would have been a huge coup for the studio. In January 2017, he had what he considered his optimal version of Justice League, almost 4 hours long, although he knew it was something the studio would not release. Warner's wanted to cut in the 2-hour range, and he delivered a rough version with an approximate 2-hour and 20-minute running time. That was the first cut the studio saw. Both sides agreed that there was much work still to be done before the November release, but tragedy struck the Snyders when their daughter Autumn died by suicide. A month and a half later, Zack officially stepped away and Whedon was brought in. League opened in November 17th to weak reviews and sluggish box office. It was a terrible movie. It was one of the most disappointing films I've ever seen. Eventually taking in $658 million worldwide, a huge disappointment with all those characters. However, almost immediately a movement was born. Fans unhappy with the film created the now infamous hashtag at change.org. Petition for Warner's to release the Snyder version had already garnered over 100,000 signatures less than 5 days after the movie's release. Forget that the version that fans wanted technically didn't exist. What did exist, and let's be clear here, very important, what did exist was a semi-unfinished work with no visual effects, no post-production. One person who had seen that version described it like a car with no panels, just a drivetrain and some seats, and it sat on a hard drive in the Snyder's house. When we left the movie, I just took the drive of the cut on it, says Zack Snyder. I honestly never thought it would be anything. In the years following their daughter's death, the Snyders closed circles around their family as they tried to heal from the tragedy. The first year was about the milestones and the holidays, recalls Deborah Snyder. Now it's not those, but other moments like songs that trigger memories that hit me unexpectedly. Adds Zack. As a family, as a couple, I think we have grown in a way that has made us stronger. We're doing our best. You really can't hope for more. The duo also became involved in suicide prevention charity work and plotted a return to movies with Army of the Dead, which they're doing for Netflix. Meanwhile, release the Snyder Cut became more organized and visible, gaining mainstream media attention. Zack Snyder fed into the movement by occasionally teasing images from his movie or storyboards on social media, in some ways only stoking the hot embers. And he saw some of the seeds he planted in his movies, especially in his castings of Gadot as Wonder Woman and Momoa as Aquaman, grow into gardens as the spin-offs became pop culture phenomenons and billion-dollar hits. Lest we not forget, Zack Snyder's Aquaman and his Wonder Woman went on to collectively make Warner Brothers almost $2 billion. And he was the one that cast them. And he was also a producer on those films. It was on the 2-year anniversary, however, that the Zenith hit and the hashtag became a top worldwide trend. Release the Snyder Cut is the most tweeted hashtag about a movie that Warner Brothers has ever made. But it's a movie that they never released, says Snyder. It's a weird stat, but it's cool. After the Sunday morning phone call, the Snyders began to move puzzle pieces into place. We had to figure out what it meant to finish it. How do you pull it off, recalls Deborah. Let's remember, this was in November of 2019. So all of the narratives that have been spun we're now solidifying those into reality. The Snyders put together a presentation and in early February of this year invited a select group of executives from Warner Brothers, HBO Max, and DC to their house in Pasadena to screen Zack's little scene version that was shown in black and white. Why do you show it in black and white? Because when you're showing a film that's predominantly green screen, where you've got all these action scenes in front of a green screen, it's very off-putting to watch. Showing it in black and white was a very smart thing to do. It also reiterates the fact that this is unfinished and isn't as off-putting as green screen because the green registers as gray. The number of executives in the room, and there were more than a dozen in attendance, ranging from Warner's Emmerich, Toby Emmerich, Carolyn Blackwood, Walter Hamada, and Courtney Valenti. Courtney Valenti, by the way, Worked in the story department when I worked at Warner Brothers as a young whippersnapper. I always liked Courtney Valenti. She's Jack Valenti's daughter. She was always nice to me, and she'd always give me the time of day. So kudos to you, Courtney Valenti, for being at Warner Brothers. I should have stuck around. To HBO Max's Kevin Riley, Sarah Aubrey, and Sandra Dewey. To DC's Jim Lee. Showed the importance of the potentially extensive undertaking. Heads of physical production and business affairs, which is part of where I worked, were there to assess what needed to be done and how much it would cost. At his presentation after the screening, Snyder outlined ideas for not just releasing the cut, but the concept of episodes and cliffhangers. The executives left the meeting pumped. The Snyder cut was real, except then it almost wasn't. The novel coronavirus struck, and Hollywood all but shut down in mid-March. Says Deborah, people thought it won't be possible to ramp up and that maybe this should go on the back burner. But we said, no, this is exactly the right time because our visual effects houses that rely on so much are running out of work. So now is the time to be doing this because people can do visual effects on computers and things remotely, just like I produce this the visual effects, these special features for The Hills Run Red right here where I'm sitting right now by myself. So now is the time to be doing this. It also helped that many of those post facilities had held on to the original assets. People should understand that's what people in post do. We don't give anything up. We, of course, finish the material and deliver it, but it's not like we don't have all of the assets sitting on our computers. That doesn't mean you get them for free, though. Snyder also spent April and May reaching out to the sizable cast, giving a heads up on the new development and letting them know their services may be needed. The first person called, Ray Fisher, Cyborg himself, who played Cyborg. He was like, you're kidding me, right? Recalls Zack? Yeah, Ray Fisher, who was totally shortchanged. His entire backstory was eliminated from the movie. Can't wait to see it. I have always loved Vic Stone, one of my favorite. Well, he should be in the Titans, but whatever. I love that character. There is no schedule going forward at this stage for the project, as talks are now beginning with post-production houses, which also gives HBO Max plenty of time to find the best way to present this version of Justice League. Snyder is at the same time in post on Army of the Dead, his zombie thriller for Netflix that will also debut in 2021. For the Snyders, the chance to revisit the movie also brings the prospect for closure on a project they were forced to let go. The movie was the culmination of a hero's journey that all these characters went on, says Deborah Snyder, and the idea was always to build them up to be the heroes people expected them to be. And while the cut will contain the many elements Zack has teased over time, yes, expect Darkseid. Oh my God, people. Yes, expect Darkseid. I mean, where are we here? If you people ever thought that I was not a fan of the Fourth World, I mean, come on. I mean, seeing Darkseid, are you kidding me? That's what I wanted out of this movie, man. When I hear that, I get a throbbing nerd boner when the idea that Darkseid might be in a movie. That's the way it should have been, people. The duo also relish adding a fair amount of character development. What's so lovely about this is we get to explore these characters in ways that you're not able to do in a shorter theatrical version. The Snyders know that fan power is what led to the Snyder Cut becoming a reality. Clearly, this wouldn't be happening without them, says Zack. He also credits Warner's for living up to its old reputation as the filmmaker's studio. Adds Zack, this return to that pedigree and to let my singular vision of the movie be realized in this format, in this length, is unprecedented and a brave move. Yes, it is. So there's the facts laid out in the Hollywood Reporter by Boris Kitt today, right after Zack Snyder made this announcement. But let's remember, this film, as I have always said, is very far from being complete. I would love it if it's one movie. I think they should make it a 4-hour movie, release it on video, put it on HBO Max, just like they did with, say, the Ultimate Edition of Watchmen and Batman v Superman. I'm happy to see this filmmaker's version realized because I really hated Justice League. I hated what was done to the film. I understand why it was done. But man, what a disappointing experience that movie was. Very disappointing. I'm very excited for everybody involved, however. So, very, very, very cool. And congratulations to Zack and Deborah Snyder for getting this realized. I can't wait to see it. Congratulations to the fans for burning the torch. And while it frequently, the hashtag release the Snyder Cut annoyed me to no end a lot of the time because people were talking out of their ass and they didn't know what they were saying. It's nice to finally have the facts and to find out what is going to happen, and how cool would that be? Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's another thing that I wanted to share. I was going to share it yesterday, but I was working on the Netflix show that I'm working on in a very small way, but I was in fact working on it. And so this article, which feeds into what we were saying, also dropped on Variety today. This is from Adam B. Very. Study shows 70% of consumers would rather watch movies at home. Actually, I'll probably have to make that bigger just so I can read it. So I apologize. Let me just bring this down a little bit. Bring it down, which I again apologize for. I need to be able to read this whole thing, but I want you to be able to see it. All right. For weeks now, as COVID-19 restrictions across the country begin to ease, or in some cases even when they haven't, national and local news outlets have relentlessly reported on a seeming torrent of people streaming into public spaces. The coverage points to a common sense understanding. Spending 2 months sheltering in place with little to no human contact has produced an overpowering need for people to gather together outside their homes. According to an exclusive new study, however, that media coverage belies a deeper truth. Anxiety over health and safety in public spaces still greatly outweighs the desire to leave home, and that disparity has only gotten larger as the pandemic has unfolded. The results from a survey of roughly 1,000 people in mid-May by sports and events analytics firm Performance Research, in partnership with Full Circle Research Company, point to just how steep a climb the entertainment industry has in front of it to win back public perception that it's safe to attend and spend money on public events. Take this answer to the question of whether respondents would rather see a first-run feature as a digital rental at home or in a movie theater, if both were available today. A whopping 70% say they are more likely to watch from their couch, while just 13% they are more likely to watch at a local cinema, with 17% not sure. I mean, look at this, by the way. Look at this. Look at this graph here. If costs are roughly the same, would you prefer to see a first-run movie you're excited about as a digital rental at home or in a movie theater if both were available at the same time? 70% would rather watch at home. Just as the country begins to open up, there's been a swing toward increasing caution, with a majority of Americans clearly saying, not yet, when it comes to attending large public events, said Jed Pearsall, president of Performance Research. The top-line findings, especially in comparison with a similar performance research study conducted in mid-March, are equally stark. Even after the CDC and local governments say it's safe to do so, 52% of respondents say they will attend fewer large public events, up from 44% in March, just days after the CDC declared the COVID-19 outbreak a global pandemic. Even more striking, this month, 60% of respondents say the idea of attending a big public event will scare me for a long time. Just about every major industry sector, respondents have grown more fearful about stepping into public spaces. 39% say they'll attend a major indoor concert less often, up from 33% in March. 36% say they'll attend theme parks less often, up from 26%. And 33% say they'll attend theater and performing arts venues less often, up from 29%. For Broadway productions, a new line of inquiry in the May study, the news is especially worrying. 51% of respondents say it will take a few months before they will attend a Broadway show in New York, even after it's deemed safe to do so. The news for movie theaters is scarcely any better. 37% of respondents say they plan to attend less often, up from 28% in March, and 10% say they may never go again, up from 6%. But for those who are considering returning to movie theaters, what may draw them appears to be shifting. When asked which movie genres would most likely get them to buy a movie ticket, 43% of respondents, by far the highest percentage, say comedy. A near 180 in public sentiment after years of moribund box office returns by big screen comedies. The next most popular genre, drama, with 35% of respondents, has all but disappeared from theaters. Meanwhile, the genre that has dominated the past decade, superhero action movies, came in third, with 33% of respondents selecting it, a startling number given the massive audiences comic book movies generally require to recoup. And horror, a dependable and inexpensive box office draw for years, drew interest from only 19% of respondents, leading me to believe that whoever they interviewed for this subject were probably older folks. Of course, these responses were given for abstract genres and not specific titles. Now, this goes on. I just want to touch on this briefly because I do think I'm going to put it right here into the live chat. Here it is in the live chat. You can read the rest of this article. And I would say to all of you that, look, this global pandemic has been terrible for everyone. But when the numbers are looked at, when we see what all the statistics are, I am confident that we will all eventually return to normal. People look at Contagion, Steven Soderbergh's film, which I love, which is very much about a coronavirus outbreak. I think it's called MERS in that movie. It had a 25 to 30% fatality rate, and the world was obviously going nuts. This is a fraction below 1% on a global scale. It's still very serious. Eventually, people, we will get back to normal. We will go back to movie theaters. You know when I'm going to be confident to go back to movie theaters? When I get to go see this, the Snyder Cut, in IMAX, probably IMAX 3D, you never know. But it will happen. We will see this movie in theaters before its debut on HBO Max, if only for a weekend. It's going to happen. Anyway. Just wanted to delve into that. So, ladies and gentlemen, what do you guys think? What do you think of? It's a great day for fandom. I think that there's a lot of excitement here, but I mean, I do also want to say that there is the reality of filmmaking that we're dealing with here, and lest we not forget, that is something that we cannot forget. How important it is. What is the reality of how films are made? The fact is that this assembly cut of the Snyder Cut was something that was in process like every movie. There was nothing special about it, but it had a year in post-production to go. A year. And that's what I was always saying. $20 to $30 million is on the low end. I would say it's probably going to cost at least $50. And remember, the studio has to justify who's spending that money. And how do they get it back? The great thing is, as I've been saying lately on the John Campea show, is with HBO Max, the money can come from marketing or production money that's earmarked to make the shows and the movies. If you get a Justice League movie like the Snyder Cut, something that's brand new that fanboys around the world are going to love to watch, I would say a $50 million expense is a bargain. It's a bargain. And they release it theatrically. You release the Snyder Cut of Justice League. You release a 4-hour Justice League movie for a week in theaters. You'll make your $50 million back. If it's marketed. I mean, obviously that's more money, but don't want to get into that. But hey, it's true. It's true. So, kudos to the fans. Kudos to everybody that did the release the Snyder Cut. I would say that this is a good indication of what fans are capable of, and the fact that we do have a voice. If you are not content with what you are getting, it's interesting to know the release the Snyder Cut people were organized. They did some interesting things. They put their money where their mouth was, and they didn't just scream bloody murder or criticize people on the internet. They actually did things like, get a plane to fly over Comic-Con. That was pretty amazing stuff. And that, remember, if you want to have your voice heard, the more legitimate you make your voice, the more legitimate is that voice in the eyes of the people that need to listen. So pretty cool from everyone. And I would say this is a great, now look, does this mean I think everybody who didn't like The Last Jedi should take up arms and say, no, I don't. This was a unique experience. It was something that, it was unique in Hollywood history. And I would hope that not everybody would think that just because I for one am not going to go screaming bloody murder to CBS. I can talk about it, but I'm not going to go ask for Alex Kurtzman and Secret Hideout and everybody currently making Star Trek to be replaced. While I might like that in the short term, I also know it could be a lot worse. So, but anyway, kudos to everybody involved. I think that this is a great victory. And for whatever reason, all I know is that the version of Justice League that we got in the theaters, and I love Joss Whedon. I'm a big staunch defender of Age of Ultron. I am very, very happy that a filmmaker who busts his ass like Zack Snyder will finally get his vision realized. Whether it's a man, whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, any filmmaker, or if you're non-binary, however you want to identify yourself, anybody that makes a movie and is deep, deep, deep into production and doesn't get it finished, or it sits on a shelf, knows that singular pain. And it's so great to see another artistic vision realized. We are richer for it as a culture, and for a kid like myself, who's loved Justice League since I was, 5 years old, 4 years old, 3 years old, I just can't wait to see a Justice League movie that I might like. So kudos to that. Now, my man, Claude Hibbert is here. Claude Hibbert, as you know, sends in letters. Claude sent in something that he directed to our beloved Willow Yang. So here's a letter from Claude. Dark Willow. Bonjour, Monsieur Robert. Comment allez-vous? Robert, this letter is in response to a major imagination connoisseur extraordinaire, Willow Yang. Specifically, her letter on darkness. Background: over the last year, I listened to you read Willow Yang's thoughtful letters. A few months ago, as you read one of Willow's letters, I made a comment in the chat, "Well, that was dark." Willow responded, asking me what was wrong. Months later, Willow wrote a letter questioning what the meaning of dark means. Of course, that made me chuckle. I've been promising Willow a response. Marvel's Hellfire Club. Fictionally, the Hellfire Club began as an exclusive British gentlemen's club before relocating to Manhattan in the 1760s. Mastermind, an old enemy of the X-Men and master illusionist, secured membership into the inner circle by seducing the Phoenix over the course of a few years. Now he's convinced her that she is the Black Queen, the personification of an aristocratic ancestor in colonial America. The X-Men attempted to infiltrate the Hellfire Club's mansion and liberate Phoenix. Unfortunately, Cyclops, Storm, Nightcrawler, and Colossus were captured. Only Wolverine escaped and is presumed dead. With that premise, Claude's bringing you his version of Dark Willow. Fade in. Interior. Hellfire Club. Sub-basement. Darkness. A flashlight breaks into the darkness of the Hellfire Club sub-basement. Masked, armed, uniformed men tactically secure the room. They are part of an elite mercenary cadre. Mercenary. Man, we've been searching these basements for an hour hunting a mutie who's probably dead. Wolverine went into a storm sewer, right? It was like a flash flood down there. If the fall didn't kill him, the water had to. Cut 2. Wolverine, played by me, Robert Meyer Burnett. Eyes open in the dark. Cut 2. Wide shot of mercenary crew and this storage area. In the background, Wolverine, me. Wolverine's shadow quickly drops from the ceiling, and we hear the muffled cry from one mercenary. Simultaneously, we hear the familiar snicked of Wolverine's adamantium claws emerging. The remaining mercenaries turn toward the place where their comrade used to be. What remains are the scattered entrails of the litter that litter the floor. The remaining mercenaries switch their weapons to fire. Another mercenary drops to the floor as his leg is severed from his body. Bursts of automatic machine gun fire ring out. Wolverine, me, suddenly emerges from the other side of the room and decapitates the other mercenary. Like a rag doll, the headless mercenary drops his gun and collapses. Fade in. Interior, Hellfire Club, library, night. The leadership of the Hellfire Club stand triumphant before the subdued and bound members of the X-Men team. Among the members of the Hellfire Club, the Black Queen, Willow Yang, stands wearing a corset, boots, and a cape. Her hair is styled in Victorian teased updo. Look it up. The White Queen, Elizabeth Bell, lounges on a settee. She's wearing a white fur coat, corset, and thigh-high boots. Well, kind of like this. There I am, but there's Elizabeth. Let's say she's the White Queen. There you go. I'm telling you, that's exactly what we're talking about, but in a context of X-Men. There you go. The Red Queen, Vesna Lukic, casually reviews an original edition of Hearts of Darkness by the bookcase. Leland, Russell Crowe, a stout mutant. Pierce, Leonardo DiCaprio, the cyborg. Sebastian Shaw, again, who I also play, chairman of the Inner Circle, holds center court. As the director, he chose 2 roles. Mastermind, Johnny Depp, quietly smokes a cigarette, closely watching his new spiritual bride, the Black Queen. Can you imagine Willow Yang and Johnny Depp hooking up? Could be awesome. Cyclops, Chris Pine, it was in Willow's contract, struggles to his feet. Storm, Sonequa Martin Green, Rob had to smooth things over with CBS Viacom Paramount, leans over to help Cyclops. Suddenly, Wolverine, me, bursts in through the door of the library with 3 mercenaries hanging on. He throws a mercenary into Leland DiCaprio. A pitched battle ensues. The Black Queen turns to Mastermind. And remember, the Black Queen is Willow Yang, who we saw on my Zoom birthday, who is adorable. So here's Willow as the Black Queen. You made a mistake when you read my letter. You triggered a memory. I know you've been using illusions to control me. When you tried to convince me that the characters in Love Actually weren't annoying, I snapped back. Willow slams Mastermind against the wall with a Phoenix Force claw. Willow. Hugh Grant fires the girl he likes because President Billy Bob Horndog was sniffing up her skirt? Well, that's stupid. Mastermind, Johnny Depp. No! Mastermind is exposed to the power cosmic, which is too much for a mortal man. He's driven insane. Fade out. Cut 2. Exterior, Central Park, baseball fields, night. The X-Men Skycraft hovers. Cut to the interior of the Skycraft, or the Blackbird. Later, the X-Men are aboard their Skycraft, which is hovering above the Central Park Reservoir. A storm rages above. On the communication screen, Princess Lilandra of the Shi'ar Empire appears on screen. Lilandra, who is Paula Boilers. X-Men, this is X-Men, this is Princess Lilandra. We detected a power spike on Earth. Storm, look, it's Princess Lilandra. The X-Men are distracted by the communique and do not see Willow transforming. Dark Willow, you will need more than the Shi'ar Empire to save you. The X-Men turn to Willow. Her corset and cape have been replaced by a red version of the Phoenix costume. Her hair is swaying in the cosmic wind. Her voice booms. Dark Willow, hear me, Post-Geek Singularity. No longer am I the imagination connoisseur you knew. I am fire and life incarnate now and forever. I am the Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix telekinetically opens Cyclops' visor, releasing his optic blasts towards Storm. As Storm opens her mouth to scream, Cyclops decapitates Storm. As Nightcrawler attempts to teleport, she redirects his rematerialization into the bulkhead of the Skycraft. Only his face and legs are visible. Colossus transforms into steel, and the Dark Phoenix Willow Yang makes him impossibly dense and sends him hurtling through the floor of the Skycraft into the ground of the park and straight into the mantle of the earth. Cyclops is forced to watch Storm's headless body writhe, and Nightcrawler's head falls to the floor. End scene. That's dark. Why? Is it the sense of horror? Inappropriateness? Is it the unknown? Ultimately, storytelling is about the human condition. Darkness is not only a matter of taste, it is also about power and the rights of the other. So what is dark? Is the fact that the inner circle has a private sex club? Is that dark? I would say that's seedy. What if the Black King, Sebastian Shaw, celebrates International Women's Day? Well, I think that would be a personal choice. If there were sex slaves in the dungeon, well, that would be dark. A threesome by itself is not dark. If the threesome is comprised by Winnie the Pooh, Tigger, and Piglet, well, that's messed up and beyond dark. I was expecting PG and ended up with Caligula. Wolverine justly dispatching a squad of bad guys? No, that's just. How about Wolverine, me, graphically dismembering the mercenaries? Getting there. Okay, how about Wolverine licking the blood off his claws as he admires his fallen prey? Well, I would say that's dark. The fact that Mastermind used his powers to seduce Jean Grey? Dark. The fact that he has sex with her, masked in an illusion of an attractive man, while encouraging her to embrace the persona of a fictitious ancestor? Dark. Dark Phoenix consuming an entire star system by itself was bad. The indirect genocide of the fourth planet in that system was dark. It's dark because crimes against humanity are being committed. So what is dark? To pursue pleasure from the deprivation of another's freedom, poverty, and dignity? I will add that after R&B's inclusive and insightful commentary and Elizabeth's grounded views, Willow's amazing letter are the highlights of the Post-Geek Singularity. In closing, you know what's good? Listening to Robservations and hearing another letter from Willow Yang. Actually, that's better good. It's priceless. Live long and prosper, children of the atom. Thanks for reading this letter, Rob. And Willow, thanks for the inspiration. Man, I just love that, Claude, that you cast me as the Black King and Wolverine. What's not to love? I mean, how amazing is that? Anyway, I'm going to jump into what you guys are saying. I got a lot of letters to read, ladies and gentlemen. And let's see what's going on, whether there's a lot happening here. And for whatever reason, I have to say that YouTube is not our friends today, but okay. Oops, sorry, I screwed that up. Let's get back down to your letters and things. So, let me go back. Zachary King says, Rob, this morning I watched Reanimator on your recommendation, and I quite enjoyed it. I know, right? I would also like to recommend to the Post-Geek Singularity a new show on Hulu called The Great, which is a historical satire in the vein of The Favorite or The Death of Stalin. Elizabeth has been watching The Great with Nicholas Hoult from X-Men and About a Boy. And, of course, Elle Fanning, and it's delightful. I have to say, it's a lot of fun. Willow herself is here. While I'm personally tired of hearing about the Snyder Cut, knowing that we'll get to see more of Henry Cavill's Superman and Batfleck is always a positive, in my opinion. Well, Willow, I agree with you. I like both of their portrayals as those characters. I have hot toys of each of them, and I'm glad to know that we are going to see more. Isn't that it's exciting? It's exciting. I'm excited. Just like you. Dan Ketchum sends in a tip and says, despite all the hullabaloo, I think the Snyder Cut will actually be worse than the Joss Whedon version. I doubt it. Snyder does great visuals, but he's not very good with characters and dialogue. I'll bet you the Snyder version does stand head and shoulders above that version. I do. Nick Parrish sends in a tip and says, so Rob, it looks like the fan community got it right. They've been screaming that a director's cut of Justice League should and would come out for the last 2.5 years, so I have to give a toast to victory for the fans. As do I, everyone. I raise my glass of water to all of you. And you know what? This was the fans doing. If it wasn't for the hullabaloo, this wouldn't happen. So I will say this. Release the Snyder Cut. Have I liked all of them? No. A lot of people have come after me online. But the organization of it, the higher echelons of Release the Snyder Cut have a lot to be proud of today. So good for you guys. I think it's great. And yes, they do deserve a toast. So that's awesome. That is awesome. Eyes on the Wire sends in a tip and says, does more of the tip money make it to you? Yes. For those of you who want to know, like a lot of YouTubers that rely on super chats or tips for their revenue, super chats, 30% are taken off the top by YouTube, and not as much are taken by chats, obviously. So that is the case. And I think I speak for myself and everybody else, everybody who gets the support. I mean, it's hard to make YouTube shows every single day. You have to have the equipment. It's work. Like John Campea employs not multitudes, but multiple people. And I have to say, I had never appeared on John Roca's show before, but John Roca has a really crack team of people working for him. He's like employing people that are doing work, and he's doing multiple shows, multiple platforms. And I had a really great experience on his show, and also seeing how Roca's got his own little organization, basically, and he's going to be employing people just like Joe Rogan does. I mean, Joe Rogan is going to be leaving YouTube as his primary platform of choice, but he's been doing the work, and as YouTubers get bigger, they employ people. Jeremy, Geeks and Gamers, he's employing people. I mean, it's so when you guys are supporting your favorite YouTubers, and I should say just support me. No, there's a lot of great voices out there, and I appreciate the support everybody gives me on a daily basis, and a weekly basis, and a monthly and a yearly basis. I really do. But everybody's out there. It's hard work. I mean, I often get called, and other YouTubers I see is called grifters. I'm like, man, this is the 421st episode of this show. There's literally hundreds and hundreds of hours of content that I've been providing. I mean, think about it. Your favorite TV show gives you what, 10? Sure, it costs a lot more money, and I can't wait to see the new seasons of Umbrella Academy, and I don't mean to compare and contrast myself with that. I would love to be making, actually, to tell you the truth, I have been working on a Netflix show that has yet to be announced, but I've been working on it in a very small way, but I was working on episode 11 of that show yesterday. So, so that's the case. But when, like right now, I can't even tell the way I normally can see super chats. I can't see them today. I don't know why. I don't know what's gone on. I don't know if this is a glitch, but it's frustrating when YouTube takes 50% of the ad revenue and 30% of super chats off the top from creators. So they're making a very healthy profit off our work. So, yeah. Raymond Verrata is here. He says, if the Snyder Cut gets shown on HBO Max, how will the numbers add up in terms of box office? If they do add up, will it be added to the original box office run or as a separate movie? You also better thank the coronavirus for the Snyder Cut. Okay. There's a couple of things that I want to be very clear about in terms of how movie making works. If the Snyder Cut is on HBO Max, it will not be part of the box office. The Snyder Cut will be a whole new entity. When movies get made, every movie that gets made is its own business. They start it up usually as a limited liability corporation. So when a movie is made, it becomes its own business because it has to, everything that goes into making a movie or how much a movie is made is part of that business, of that singular movie. So all of that can be charted in terms of how much was spent and how much is made. So it's very funny when the movie is finished, it's usually made under an LLC that's then sold to, say, a studio. Even though Warner Brothers is in charge of making the movie itself is set up as its own entity with its own payroll. It's very interesting. So this new version of the Snyder Cut, Justice League, has already been made. On the books at Warner Brothers, it's already been made or lost money or whatever. If it lost money, they already wrote it off. So the Justice League that exists is an entity unto itself. And this version will be, and I don't know, I'm fascinated. I'd love to know. Like, how is this version seen in the eyes of the WGA? Do the screenwriters get paid again? Is it a separate... Do the actors get paid again? Do they have to be paid double? This is a new version of the movie. Now, Warner Brothers has released 2 versions of Exorcist 4. You know, so they've done it before. There are 3 versions of The Watchmen on home video that Zack Snyder has done. How did Warner Brothers pay for those? How does that work within the guild? Or is this also part of Justice League's money? I mean, is this considered a home video release? And by the way, all of these things have legal and financial implications. They all have to be worked out. It's not just a question. People think, let Zack Snyder finish his movie. No, the legal concerns. Warner Brothers is a guild signatory. It has to abide by Writers Guild rules. It has to abide by Directors Guild rules. It has to abide by SAG rules, in addition to IATSE and all kinds of other rules. How does that work? I don't know. This is way beyond my pay grade. I have no idea. But it's a big deal. It's a big deal. So, and this is something that the fans have no idea about. They're not incorporating any of this. You can't just make a movie and release it and expect everybody to be like, yeah, put out that film. What do you think Gal Gadot's agent is going to say that they've got Wonder Woman 84 coming out? You think she's not going to want a little cheddar for the effort? I mean, it's a very interesting question. But apparently they have resolved these issues. We shall see. I don't know. But I hope somebody does, or somebody, I'm sure one of the industry trades will do an entire analysis of what is required, because this is a fascinating precedent. You know, it's not like when Rennie Harlan and Paul Schrader each directed a version of The Exorcist, an Exorcist sequel. They were separate films, separate entities. Zack Snyder's the director of record of Justice League. It's not Joss Whedon. So does this work as only a home video entity? I don't know. No idea, but there are questions that need to be asked. So Raymond, good question. I don't know the answer. Chris Clark sends in a tip and says, thank you, Chris. Keep rocking, Rob. Hope your birthday weekend smashed. Here's to future film talks in the future. Absolutely. Thank you for supporting the channel. I appreciate it. Koba's here, my favorite dead simian. Koba says, I was one of those people who hated the Justice League theatrical cut. You and me, brother. Can I say brother if you're a simian? But yeah, I hated it. I hated it. I thought it was a terrible movie. However, while I will give this cut a try when it finally arrives in the UK, I'm not expecting much. Was not a fan of Batman v Superman or Man of Steel either. Well, you know, I was. I think, if nothing else, they have a singular vision. I'd like to see it continued. I really hope to see this. I call this the Man of Steel trilogy. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. Anonymous sends in a tip and says, on the subject of does Superman kill, I ask you, Rob, this question. Did Zod survive what happened to him at the end of Superman 2? I think so. The classic scene where Superman outsmarts Zod, rids him of his powers, and flat out murders Zod. At least that's what I saw. But does he? Does he murder Zod? Or is he just stripping of his powers? I don't know. I think, look, I mean, people try and kill Superman. This idea that Superman, in the context of, one of the great things about Man of Steel is it shows exactly the catastrophic events and the catastrophic fallout of what would happen if two super beings like Zod and Superman fought. It would be no good for anyone, especially in an urban environment. That's why I love, one of my favorite things in any Superman movie is the beginning of Batman v Superman, when Bruce Wayne arrives in Metropolis to watch his building destroyed. It's amazing. Amazing. Dita is here. Rob. Dita, Shiny Bastion is here, and he sends in a tip and says, Rob, we need an extensive behind-the-scenes documentary about the making of the Snyder Cut. A dream come true. Get on it. That could be almost more interesting than the movie itself. What a win for fandom. I am Ghibli with delight. Well, Dieter, longtime imagination connoisseur and one of the cornerstones of this channel, I agree with you. I'm sure they already have somebody on it, but it would be a really fascinating story. I should make a call. It would be fascinating to see. Love to see that. Jack Frost sends in a tip and says, started watching Star Trek from the beginning after watching the original series. The original series movies, I believe, are the best series of movies that I have seen in total. Well, from your mouth to God's ears, Jack. Query, I am on season 1 of Next Generation, The Big Goodbye. When Dr. Crusher tries to copy the woman in red to the lobby, the woman in red looks like Jennifer Tilly or Meg Tilly. IMDb has no info. Do you know by chance? I don't think it's Meg Tilly. It might be. I'm not sure. Keep doing what you do. That's a question. I do not know the answer to that. I have no idea. I'll look for you, though. I don't know. Paul Gilmore says, Rob, I think I'm going through Pon Far. What do I do? Well, when I was a teenage boy, I went through Pon Far about 4 times a day. What you have to do is what everybody has to do. You have to return to Vulcan. And you have to find who you were hooked up with, as kids. Who was your arranged marriage to? And I would say get busy. But remember, if you're going to do that, you need to practice the Burnett philosophy whenever you're hooking up with your betrothed. Remember, ladies first, if you know what I'm saying. And I think you do. You want to be somebody that provides for her needs first, if you know what I mean. Eyes on the Wire tipped $1 and says, congratulations on cracking the 1,000 viewer mark. Well deserved. Well, thank you. I hope. Did I really? Was there 1,000 people here? Well, how many people are here now? I don't even know. Let's see. Can I see? I don't know, man. Now I can't see. There's 668 now. I guess if people are here, good for them. Thank them. That's amazing. That I didn't know that. Twin Flicks sends in a tip and says, howdy, Rob. If you don't mind, I wanted to share with our fellow Post-Geek Singularity our interview with cinematographer Dean Semler. Oh, I'll put that in. Twin Flicks has been killing it. They also recently did an interview with director Alex Proyas, who directed the Whining About Movies movie, Dark City. So check out their interview. Here it is. It's in the live chat. Kabam. There you go. Twin Flicks, congratulations. Nick Parrish sends in a tip and says, Rob, is it just me, or do you get a giggle sometimes seeing Steve Munchin do the White House interviews and being addressed as Mr. Secretary, knowing he used to be a Hollywood producer and was one of the producers of Guy Ritchie's King Arthur? No, I mean that's why he's there. I mean, I do. Steve Munchin, our Treasury Secretary, was in fact a Hollywood producer, and he will be again. He will be again. Dan V sends in a tip and says, I don't think this is a time for rejoicing. The Snyder Cut fandom harassed many people and flooded Warner Brothers Twitter threads where it's rewarding bad behavior. I'll see it from curiosity, and I'm impressed that they're spending the money, but it's a bad precedent. Well, I would say this. To quote Will Wheaton, don't be a dick. Fandom, we have a lot of toxicity in fandom. But there was a lot of organization and a lot of people who didn't do that. I mean, I myself received the ire from a lot of fans based on my stance on the Snyder Cut, which came from a production standpoint. But I'm happy this happened. I think it's kind of cool. And you know what? Zack Snyder's version of Justice League, if what we got was great, the Warner Brothers executive team that were overseeing movies at the time when Justice League and when Suicide Squad was made a lot of boneheaded choices. They were reactionary. Look, nobody ever got rich in Hollywood reacting to a trend. You get rich in Hollywood setting trends. Those people needed to go away. Kevin Tsujihara and his entire team, or whoever was working underneath him, he came from the amusement park division of Warner Brothers. They made bad decisions, and they were following trends. They were not setting trends, and they didn't do the right thing. Austin sends in a tip and says, did you ever watch the Sarah Connor Chronicles? I did. Can the release of Snyder Cut Army help to resurrect this show for me? Sorry, it doesn't work that way. Remember, Zack Snyder had already shot this movie. He was in the process of making his film, finishing it when it went all pear-shaped. So it's lucky. Dan V goes on and says, a problem is that the Snyder Cut fandom will claim it's better no matter what, and the ones against it will say it's worse. If it's not received well, brace for the people saying the original script wasn't shot anyway with the really scary version after Batman v Superman. Look, you know what? I think here's my advice to fandom. You know what? Don't buy back a win. You know, let's rejoice in this. Let's be quiet. Take this victory, enjoy it. Fandom should celebrate this, and let's wait and see what we get. I would say, look, from my perspective, I would love to see this as a movie. I don't want to see it broken up into a TV show. This is a fucking huge, awesome, important movie. Let it be a movie. Let it be a 4-hour epic. And let Zack Snyder make it the version that he wants to make. Don't split it into 2 parts. It's streaming. You can stop in the middle. Let this be a 4-hour epic, and let us get an IMAX release the weekend before it gets released on HBO Max. Mark Evans sends a tip and says, Rob, I've been searching and I found 2 sites that list 4K movies. One has reviews in 4K and audio quality too. Please share. Well, one is, of course, the Digital Bits. That is, of course, my good friend Bill Hunt, who I've known for years and years. The Digital Bits to me is the Wall Street Journal, or whatever your go-to media of choice is. Oh, hang on. Let me put that in. Hang on. Here's the Digital Bits. Go check that out. And here's a list that he also puts down of 4K titles, which is here. So there you go. Stub McShave is here and says, what do you think Joss Whedon thinks of this news? He was given a thankless job of salvaging Justice League with his hands tied behind his back when it came to running time, as well as the time he had to work on it. The 2 versions will undoubtedly be compared. Joss Whedon's a professional, and he understands, like, he stepped into a thankless task. He's already dealt with the slings and arrows of the movie underperforming. Wasn't his fault. His name isn't even on it as director. And I think secretly Joss Whedon is happy for Zack Snyder. Honestly, I believe that. Mark Evans says, my last post was also sent yesterday too, so if you see that one, just ignore and not read. You don't need to read it aloud as well. If you do, read in your Willow voice. I love Willow's voice, by the way. Paul Gilmore sends in a tip and says, hey, Rob, now that the Snyder Cut worked, now I'm dreading going online, seeing all these fans that think they can bring back or redo all these movies they didn't like without understanding what really happened with Justice League. Paul, I'm right there with you. This is a unique case. It's not this film. There's nothing else like it, so it's a different thing. Let's hope people are cool about it and not monumental D-bags, but you never know. I got letters, ladies and gentlemen. I've got letters. I wasn't here yesterday, and I've got letters backed up. This letter comes from Esteban Ramos. Esteban Ramos says, hello, Mr. Burnett. Thank you for Robservations and Elizaviews whining about movies. They always put a smile on my face. Fallen Masters is coming out great. I want to give all the new characters a background first before I commence. What is a story with no good characters? Oh, I agree. What you mentioned before yesterday's show touched me right in the feels. I'm referring to making eye contact with people you meet, and I want to converse about their work. Never be shy. Be confident about yourself. I viewed the trailer for Free Enterprise and thought it was amusing, engaging, and do not want to pirate it. The act of piracy discredits the hard work people spend on creating film. I agree. It makes me sick. I want it on Blu-ray. Unsatisfactorily, I didn't find it on the format. I'm working on that. There's no Blu-ray or 4K. You read a beautiful letter from Willow Yang yesterday. In that letter, she claimed she liked the Star Wars prequels more than the original trilogy. As a child, I also embraced the prequels. Nowadays, to be honest, I affirm the prequels to be good Star Wars movies, although certainly not on par with the original trilogy. Furthermore, she additionally stated that English was hard for her to learn. I positively attest to that. I had an enormously harsh time learning German. Moving on, The Next Generation held my foundation for Trek. These new Star Wars movies are what solidified my knowledge on Star Trek. I know too little about this infinite universe. Can you explain to me the difference between a Vulcan and a Romulan? I certainly want to watch the original Star Trek films. Where would it be fine to stop watching the original Star Trek movies? The Search for Spock? I don't know. No, man, you got to watch all the way through Star Trek. Well, watch them all. up to generations. Your shows inspire me to create and also be a better person than I already am. I thank you again. Kind regards. Well, what a very nice letter. Thank you, Esteban. By the way, I love the name Esteban. There's a Star Trek episode. I think Shore Leave has a character named Esteban. So thank you for that. The difference between the Vulcans and the Romulans, according to, well, canonical Star Trek history, what we found out in the original series, is that the Romulans are an offshoot of Vulcans. They left Vulcan in the distant past. I would say that a lot of people know that Vulcans were a very savage, brutal race until the philosophy of Surak. And Surak, who we saw first in The Savage Curtain, the third season episode, The Savage Curtain, brought the idea of logic, the philosophy of logic, which eventually the Vulcan civilization took hold of. I would think, I mean, it hasn't necessarily been canonically revealed. There's been many books. If you read Diane Duane's Rihansu books, or Rihansu is Diane Duane, who's one of my favorite Star Trek novelists, created the term Rahansu. The Romulans call themselves Rahansu. They're not called, the Romulans don't call themselves Romulans. Why would they? Romulus and Remus are Earth things, but Earth names. But so the Romulans left Vulcan because Vulcan was an early spacefaring race compared to humans, and they left and they crossed the galaxy and founded their own empire on what we call Romulus and Remus. So so they are Vulcans. And of course, as human beings are wont to do, traveling into different places, you would evolve to suit your environment, which they did. So that's the difference, but they all came from the same place. Brian Eng asks, Brian Eng always throwing out those philosophical questions. As many people know, we have had an ongoing debate here at the at Robservations whether or not would you as a human being, would you have sex, would you have sexual relations with an alien? Like we talked about Spock's father Sarek and his mother Amanda. Amanda was a human, Sarek was a Vulcan. But because they looked vaguely like one another, humanoids, other than the pointed ears, they could fall in love and have a relationship. So the question has been ongoing here at Robservations. Could you have a romantic relationship or a sexual relationship with an alien? And I have jokingly said that, someone like Gamora or Mantis or the characters on, say, Farscape. I mean, if they look vaguely humanoid, if the women were vaguely humanoid looking, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But then I said, what if you met a xenomorph that was a great girl? A xenomorph that really attracted you intellectually. Could you have sex with her? And I have said, I've maintained that I probably couldn't, that I'm not woke enough to, I mean, we're talking woke, meaning interspecies wokeness. Could you do that? Could I have a romantic relationship with a xenomorph? And yes, on this show, I will say that I did joke about celebrating International Women's Day with a prehensile tail and all that. I love all that. It's all fine and good, but I don't know if I could go there with a xenomorph. I couldn't make love to an alien queen. I'm sorry. I'm just not that woke. So here's Brian Eng following up with another question about this very subject. Hi, Rob. Do you think Beauty and the Beast's Belle would have let the Beast drop the D on her if he'd stayed a beast? I believe in you, Rob, maybe more than you believe in yourself. You are an enlightened man, fully capable of looking beyond appearances and maybe even odors and falling in love with a soulmate. If there was an appropriate opening, I know you would go all the way with Pearl. Pearl, this is Pearl. You can't really see her, but I have a 1-to-1 scale bust of an alien head that we named on this show Pearl. I think absolutely, again, I don't want to speak for the ladies. This is something for Paula or Vesna or Willow to answer. Could you go the distance with the Beast if he remained in beast form? I would say if I'm sure we don't know, but I would assume the Beast is quite well endowed, and depending on if you're a size queen or not, riding the Beast's beastly, whatever you want to call it, I think there are some women that could absolutely, they're probably have even fantasized about the Beast in Beast form, whether he's animated or whether he's live action. I think that, I think many would. I think many could. The Beast was an attractive beast. I can see that happening. That kind of interspecies love, I think, could exist. I think that would, if we were in a far future, I could see the Beast come from another planet. I could see a human woman marrying the Beast. Whether they could have children or not, I don't know. And I still maintain, Brian, that I cannot go all the way with Pearl. As much as I want to think of myself as being enlightened, I just don't think I can go that far. I just don't think I could. I apologize for that. I hope I don't let all of you down by telling you I just couldn't make it with a xenomorph. I can't do it. I can't go there. I'd be too afraid. This one comes from Nick Parrish. Good afternoon, Rob. So I finally have to weigh in on the doom and gloom around the future of movie theaters, or as I call it, the theatrical infinity war and endgame. It is way too easy for people to give doomsday predictions whenever there is a temporary crisis, whether it be a health or economic related one. In 2008, people thought that every bank in the world was going to shut down, and in hindsight, that was complete lunacy. Not saying the movie theater situation is exactly the same, because movie theaters aren't businesses essential for keeping the economy running, but they are still essential for Hollywood studios to bring in big profits. While, yes, movie theater attendance has very slowly declined since the 2000s, the business still made $11.4 billion last year, and 2018 was a record year that saw a year-over-year attendance jump as well. Even with the increases in ticket prices over the years, which probably need to be addressed sooner now, that's a lot of people that went to the movies. I know streaming and PVOD are out there, but when this current health-related depression is over and people feel safe in being crowds again, I believe there may be a pent-up demand for the theater experience again. Of course, the key is when people feel safe gathering again. The timeline for that is where I may not be as pessimistic as others. For instance, a letter you read about a few weeks ago said it may take a year and a half for things to return to normal, and that every big theater chain is going to go bankrupt by this time next year. Rob, to that I respectfully say, no way. That sounds like some Milli Vanilli talk. First, Cinemark already told news outlets it has enough cash and has taken enough measures to survive well into 2021. Also, a few weeks ago, everyone thought AMC was going broke, and the only way they could get any additional funding was through bankruptcy. But when they got $500 million through a private debt offering. It's also probably fair to note that the Fed is furiously pumping money into the financial system and buying all kinds of debt. So basically, a whole lot of large publicly traded companies who probably would have gone bankrupt without the Fed and the Treasury's help can access big funding, even if they are non-essential businesses and highly distressed, i.e. AMC. Secondly, Rob, the big key is that it is looking more and more likely that this virus will have a vaccine or at least a therapeutic drug that significantly lowers the severity of this virus. If this happens sooner than later, Rob, you're not going to have as many people sitting at home on a Friday night watching the home premiere of The King of Staten Island, which is Judd Apatow's new film, starring Pete, our man Pete, which, let's just say, I don't think is going to blow the doors off the PVOD charts. Not because I don't think the film will be good or that I'm rooting against it. It's just way different film than Trolls 2, which is why I think PVOD may be prisoner of the moment, because people are expecting every movie that comes out on PVOD to be a smash hit. They may be sadly disappointed. So, Rob, even though movie theaters were taken out at the snap of a finger, they can also come back from this alternate world we are currently living in. I know there are real concerns about the future of theaters, but I do believe that when these fears subside and theater chains stop getting into public fights with studios and figure out how smart plans on how to reopen, they will make it through the battlefield alive. Hopefully, there will also be better companies after this endgame type of experience. I do apologize for the long letter, but I was itching to bring some optimism to counter the negativity. So thanks for reading this, and stay well, Rob. Well, what a great letter. I want to thank you for that, Nick. I think you're right. Look, again, the morbidity rate or whatever, we don't have people dying in the streets from this disease. A lot of people have lost their lives, and it's terrible. But from a statistical standpoint, luckily, we haven't seen more people. We still have to be very, very careful reopening, because we don't want it to flare up again. But it isn't. I don't think it's the horror. I don't think it's the end of the world as we know it. I really don't. And I think people are going to come back, and businesses are going to come back probably faster than we might have thought. Eric Kochi is here. Eric says, Eric Kochi says, Dear Robert, I think it's hilarious that someone thinks you're Doomcock. I like Doomcock and I like Nerdrotic, but there are times when they take things too far. The main difference between you and Doomcock is that you have a self-awareness that comes from your work in the industry, your upbringing as a Jewish man, and the grounding relationship that Elizabeth provides. Doomcock has no filter or self-awareness at times, and although it can be entertaining, informative, and passionate, there are times that it goes too far. He becomes the things that he hates being accused of. I would say this about Doomcock, though. Remember, Doomcock is a character. Doomcock is not going out and saying, he's a character. He's playing a character, and he's providing entertainment with production value. He's doing a show. He's doing a bit. So I think that when people say that he goes too far, I'm like, he is playing a character, and he's never made any bones about that. And I think that's something to remember. And I like his character. I find him entertaining. And I take what he says with a grain of salt. Some things I think he's very insightful about, and other things I'm like, okay, you're in character now. But I would push back and say, come on, man. Come on, man. Science fiction should be able to stand up to parody. One of my biggest beefs about Star Trek is we don't see what goes on in the rest of Starfleet. We don't see the worst or even the middle of the road. Everyone is perfect in the original series and The Next Generation. We see a glimpse of it in the TNG episode Lower Decks and the Voyager episode The Good Shepherd. The original series may hint at times with other lesser crews meeting their untimely end in various episodes, but as they said on the Inquisition, there are 1,000 ships in the fleet. Although The Trouble with Edward plays fast and loose with canonical history of the Tribbles, it takes it over a cliff and shows what happens with people in a military organization. There's those who feel competent and ready, and there are those who have just given up, so much so that they don't care anymore. I don't believe that in Starfleet, though. I don't believe when you're on a starship. I didn't believe The Trouble with Edward. I thought that was one of the lowest points in all of Star Trek history, just so you know. Commander Lucero thinks everyone is motivated as she is to be the best, but one thing she can't do is put herself in the mindset of an underachiever like Edward. See, here's my thing. Underachievers don't get on starships. There's a vetting process. You work your way up. This idea that there are underachievers on Star Trek, whether you're Tilly or whether you're Edward, dumb. No. Those people are never on starships. You cannot be. You're on the boundaries of the final frontier. Underachievers have no place. There is Nobody gets a trophy for second prize when you're going through Starfleet. You are either qualified to be on a starship or you are not. This idea that Reg Barkley is somehow a role model for other people, I do not believe that. I don't think Edward would have ever been on a starship. I've met Luceros and I've met Edwards in the Marines, in college, in retail, in the public and private sector. So have I. And I'll tell you something, none of those people would make it through Starfleet. Starfleet is an elite organization. You're dealing with the best of the best. You can't have people out on the final frontier that are like him. But I understand what you're saying. The crude implication that Edward added his DNA involving a process you still can't show on cable is kind of a South Park Rick and Morty type gag that would make old school Trekkers clutch their pearls. But I can tell you that the more men you hang out with, the chance of stupid stuff happening goes up geometrically and astronomically. I could tell you many stories about it. Oh no, I know, I'm with you. I would say that The Trouble with Edward isn't canon, it's more of a cautionary tale. I could see it being offensive, and I find it interesting that Blazing Saddles does a lot of offensive things to the Western genre, but Doomcock and Nerdrotic praise it. To praise Blazing Saddles and to be offended by The Trouble with Edward is the height of hypocrisy and cognitive dissonance. But I would say this, The Trouble with Edward is not being presented as a comedy. It's not being offensive. It's not being presented as a deconstruction of the Star Trek genre. It was being presented as something canonical. And I agree with you. Blazing Saddles, with all of its, where do white women at? And excuse me while I whip this out. All of that stuff is highly offensive. But it's also hilarious because we know going in that Blazing Saddles, it's blazing. It is a blazing, roasting send-up of the Western genre, which from the get-go. And it deals with racism. It deals with all kinds of things in a very unique way, and it's hilarious. I don't know how it would go over today, but it's being presented as comedy, whereas The Trouble with Edward, I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was. And I found it, what I found, I guess because I take Star Trek seriously, when I see something, I thought The Trouble with Edward was offensive garbage, to be honest. And I still love Blazing Saddles because The Trouble with Edward was not shown. Although, you know what? I'm willing to, it's a really interesting thing that you're pointing out. And I don't necessarily think you're wrong. It's letters like this that make me go, huh, maybe The Trouble with Edward should have been recognized by the fan base like me. I should have known from the very beginning that it was a send-up. But I didn't. I took it seriously, and I was offended by it. I can't resolve Nerdrotic's cognitive dissonance when he talks about loving carne asada burritos and doesn't acknowledge that in the 1930s, many of the older relatives were forcibly put into boxcars, taken across the border, and left there, even though they were American citizens. I'm sure you've heard about what happened to Jews forced into boxcars and they never came back. My aunt never came back from an internment camp. Gary talks about how his wife is being persecuted because she can't open her salon. Although that is the main source of income and government intervention isn't nearly enough, and that represents hardship for him, you and I know that most people lost a lot more than their income and never got anywhere near just compensation. Look, Elizabeth, my girlfriend who I live with, I mean, we were a 2-income household and we became a 1-income household immediately. And absolutely right. That's where Doomcock and Nerdrotic have been losing me lately. What I like about Mel Brooks, Tom Lehrer, and you is that you know that you are a fair game and you understand what your own weaknesses are. Doomcock and Nerdrotic come off as fragile. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for this letter. I think, look, this is a great letter, Eric. And I think that one of the things that we need to be able to do is as I like to say, is to quote Clint Eastwood, a man's got to know his limitations. And I think that is, look, I think a lot of YouTube people they're personas. They're putting on a persona. A lot of it is a bit of an act. I have to say that I'm really not. I don't do that. Like, what you see is what you get, and after 421 episodes, you can see that. I mean, I try and look at both sides of the argument, but like I said, Doomcock is a character, and I think Gary also. What I like about Gary is he wears his heart on his sleeve. His beliefs are his own. He'll tell you that, but I don't think that there's lying in Gary, and I like watching his show. I do watch I watch his show, and I think, look, he's living in San Francisco. He's an activist, and he's a bit of a hippie, and it makes sense to me. I mean, my mom went to Berkeley in the early '60s before the hippie era came, but I do think that what I like is that Gary and Doomcock are true to themselves, I think. And I feel that when I watch them, whether you like them or not, I think they're authentic. I think what you see is they're not people that are peddling something they don't believe. And whether you agree with them or not, I think it's admirable that you're getting honest points of view from both of them. And I really believe that. And I think that in itself is admirable. And that is worth celebrating when so many people are not. And I do watch Gary and Doomcock. I don't watch everything they put out, but I watch them. And I appreciate that. I feel that when you watch them, they are giving you an honest portrayal of who they are. And that alone is, I think, admirable. Whether you agree with them or not is a different thing. But I will stand by them because I both think that they are true to themselves and they actually believe what they say. And in this day and age, and I think if I was on a stream with Gary and we were having a conversation, I think he and I could disagree without yelling or shouting at one another. I think we would both talk to each other with respect, and I think that's rare. And that's why in our fan space, I think it's really important that we support those people that we like or that we're connected to, that we feel are genuine people. Because I think that's I think that's important. Omar94 is here. He says, "Hi, Rob. When it comes to movies, do you watch them and notice what happens to the characters in the movies would never happen in complete reality due to plot armor or a suspension of disbelief, but you still enjoy them anyway?" I have some examples. So here it goes. I really like Home Alone 1 and 2, but obviously there's plot armor and suspension of disbelief in those movies. In complete reality, there's no way a kid could create such elaborate and effective booby traps by himself, but it happens for suspension of disbelief. Also, in complete reality, the booby traps would kill the wet bandits, especially in the second film, but the characters survive due to plot armor. In action movies, even those I like, there's so much plot armor and suspension of disbelief. For example, when people are next to an explosion or a detonating grenade, they always fly back and remain in one place. In complete reality, you would get ripped to shreds from the shrapnel. Another thing is how the action heroes have minimal injuries by the end of the movie. They can get stabbed, shot at, punched, and kicked at, fall from great heights, and hit the ground hard, survive huge car or bike crashes, jump or crash through glass windows, remain in one piece when being near an explosion or a detonating grenade, as well as many other things, and somehow be okay by the end of the movie with only small injuries. In complete reality, they would have died way before the movie ended, or if they survived by the end, they would have been completely broken from head to toe. Those are just some ideas about plot armor and suspension of disbelief. What about you? Well, as I've always said, look, movies aren't real, and movies I usually say movies get one big ask. But I look at the Home Alone movies as being more akin to animation, like a Roadrunner cartoon. Obviously, we know that those traps, and especially in Home Alone 2, nobody could survive the way they can survive. It's supposed to be funny and amusing. So that doesn't bother me if a movie announces that from the beginning. Like if you know that there's going to be some goofiness and it isn't supposed to be totally real, then I would say I get it. So, yeah. But that doesn't bother me in the context of that movie. This one comes from Kendiana Jones. "Hi, Rob. It took me a minute to figure out what I wanted to write a letter about, but I locked on to why I become a fan of your channel. I wanted to become part of the Post-Geek Singularity and realized that that is the topic, at least for this letter, which I hope will be the first of many. I hope it'll be the first of many, too. First off, I shall unmask. My real name is Ken Williams. No, the Kendiana Jones nickname is not a pretentious identity I invented solely for the internet. Beginning around 17 years ago, I worked for a certain musical instrument retailer, which will remain nameless, and I used to wear a fedora and constantly quote Raiders with Cody, the guitar accessory guy. Another fellow coworker started calling me Kendiana Jones, and it stuck. We were top men. Anyway, like a lot of people, I first became aware of you on the John Campea show. That show randomly popped up in my YouTube feed last year while looking for content in anticipation of Avengers Endgame. Go YouTube algorithms, huh? I've become a regular viewer of the John Campea show since then, and while I really enjoy John, I regard that show as more of a movie news show. A good one, in fact. Though, while watching his show, I noticed you, Rob. With your knowledge, analysis, opinion, the fact that you'd made films, worked on special features docs like Lord of the Rings, which I used to obsess over, and therefore realized that you and I might launch our Vipers from the same flight pod. See what I did there? With that in mind, I began to watch Robservations daily, and especially during this calendar year, and I look forward to it. With all that is going on in the world, well, thank you, I appreciate that, I certainly want to preface some of what follows by saying that I am not looking for sympathy or pity. I'm not doing too bad, considering. That being said, 2020 sucks. We've all been going through a rough time, but even before the pandemic began, I'd already had enough. So a bit about myself. Besides movies, TV series, books, and storytelling, my first love is music. I'm 44 and I play drums and guitar both semi-professionally and as a hobby since I was 11. When I was a teenager, I formed what you might say was my very own Post-Geek Singularity, although it was through particular bands that my geeky friends and I bonded over. There was no band we regarded higher than Rush. Drummer lyricist Neil Peart became a very real influence on the painfully shy 14-year-old kid that I was, and my geek friends. In fact, my oldest friend Brandon Welsh and I have continued a friendship nearly 30 years making music, making film, that's right, marriages, kids, divorces, bad movie nights, Yep, I'm going to keep it that idea, but that's another letter, etc., etc. Brandon and I used to drive the back roads of our country here in Arkansas blasting Rush's Analog Kid, partly because it fucking rocked, and also because the lyrics spoke to us on a deeper level, as so much of the band's music did and still does. So you can imagine how I felt in early January when Neil Peart passed away. I can, actually. Most of us fans didn't know he was ill with brain cancer. I'd never been hit so hard by the passing of a celebrity. Obviously, months later, I now know why it broke my heart so much after assessing the very real influence he had on my life. I made lifelong friendships and made choices because of the music he created. With that in mind, many of those life choices through the 90s led me to a German-themed bar and restaurant here in the town I now live in, where I learned about proper German beer as well as more World War II education than I ever received in high school, all due to the encounter of an individual who became both an ally and a nemesis in what is great film. Enter bartender Brett Ellis. Brett quickly became more than a bartender. He became a dear friend. For the last 20 years, it had become a tradition of going over to Brett's, usually on a Monday, and presenting each other with a movie or TV series the other hadn't seen. I used to have a group of friends that did that, and we called it Boogity School. You had to bring the boogity that no one else had seen. Eric Wallace, who's the showrunner on The Flash, was one of those people. We would debate the finer points of warp core capabilities, time travel, indie survival atop a German U-boat, what the fuck happened to Cooper in season 2 finale of Twin Peaks, what the fuck happened in the Prisoner finale Fallout. I usually end up drunk on his back deck, looking up at the stars and shouting, "Con!" I enjoyed our arguments and those good times. Over this last Christmas holiday, we talked about going to see 1917 together, as Brett was a huge history buff. We never got to go. Rob, only 1 week after Neil's passing, we lost Brett. This was obviously different and far more difficult to accept, as Brett was my buddy. My best movie buddy, in fact. That being said, I guess it's no wonder after all of that, and especially during this period of social distancing, that I might find some solace here with you and our fellow imagination connoisseurs. You are doing good work, Rob, and I wanted to thank you for creating a safe place for us geeks to come, and I feel like we can express who we are. I don't have a question today, and I'll save many other things to press you on in the future, such as free enterprise, my own UA Cinema 150 experiences, yes, we had one here in Little Rock back in the day, and why I think bad movie night could still be a valid idea, and why I think it can still be a positive experience without shortchanging the hard work of the filmmakers. Then again, I enjoy a good debate, as I think I've mentioned. Anyway, even though I've unmasked, I shall now hereby resume my gimmick in earnest as Kendiana Jones, and I look forward to more arguments, disagreements, rants, debates, fun and wonder, and of course, more Robservations, sir. Until we meet again, be seeing you. What a great letter, Ken. Thank you for that. I'm sorry for your loss. 2 losses. Losing a good friend that also grokked, saw things the way you did is tough. I lost my friend Sean Fanning 9 years ago, and he was the same thing. I mean, I could talk to him about any geeky thing in the world, and it was a blow. It was really a blow to lose him. So I know what you mean. I'm sorry for your loss, but I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you have found this welcoming community of the Post-Geek Singularity. We're happy to have you. This one comes from William La Rochelle. Rob, listening to the Willow Yang letter about preferring the prequel trilogy and your own remarks afterwards crystallized a paradox of principles that you say the Post-Geek Singularity stands for. Whether it is you or fellow YouTuber Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers, we will hear, "You can love blank. It's okay if you like blank. I won't say that you are wrong for liking blank," while at the same time calling out the objective problems with a film or show or episode in question. There's a bit of false equivalency between saying after seeing Jurassic Park people will not enjoy Ray Harryhausen, and after seeing the Kennedy trilogy or the prequel trilogy, people will not be able to sit through the original Star Wars trilogy. My memory of Clash of the Titans may not measure up, but I only sat through Jason and the Argonauts for the first time in the past few years and found it engaging. Clash I respect mostly for its soundtrack and Judy Bucker. Jaws is a triumph and a must-see, regardless of whether the sharks are more articulated in Sharknado. I remember an extreme anecdote you read about some old Doctor Who fan at a convention cafeteria making a reductive remark to a little girl, I remember that, about her preferred variant of it. Obviously, such a person has a pathology given the context. But on a discussion board or Facebook, it would be silly to couch every remark or walk on eggshells in case someone's feelings are hurt because a remark diminishes their estimate of a show or iteration of something. If Hollywood realizes that people are learning exactly where their worst ideas come from and that fans are discriminating, that can only be healthy in the long run. When I bought the second release of the Star Wars Special Editions on DVD, especially for the bonus discs of the original theatrical cuts, I think I had a valid customer complaint that the bonus discs, which supposedly were sourced from the Laserdiscs, could have been at least full 720 DVD quality, but had fewer pixels, perhaps to discourage people from playing them as the default version of the trilogy. And it might have been right, rolling my eyes when an Empire of Dreams compares in a split-screen Yavin 4 as it appeared in the special edition as the CGI X-Wings rose with the 1977 version, but omitting the impression of fireflies rising from the trees, which was the charm of the initial version. I agree. When the excellent doc The Beginning, which came with The Phantom Menace, shows Jake Lloyd auditioning with an even worse contender and omits the fact that Haley Joel Osment had also tried out, we do have to question where things come from and how we are being led. It is very McClunky. When someone on social media floats praise for the new Star Trek shows and remarks, I guess I'm not one of those guys who rejects everything because it is new, I may or may not chime in. I might not have the energy, but I appreciate knowing that I could make it about the creative team and issues we hear from yourself and other imagination connoisseurs, the saga of Brian Fuller versus Kurtzman on Star Trek Discovery, and then the upcoming Clarice, for example. Another season of Hannibal by Fuller with Ellen Page as a possible Clarice doing Silence of the Lambs might have been good. I would dare say it would have been very good. We have to be careful what we wish for. I did not expect to like the Hannibal series. The modern setting and his age eliminated any survival from Nazis' backstory, but that wasn't a concern because Hannibal Rising felt like an indulgence of Thomas Harris anyway. A Fuller TV remake of Silence might be okay, but then if we went with the diversity casting of Clarice, the poor white trash did, we would have to be replaced by something Hannibal would not be rude enough to say. George Lucas softened and went PC by letting Greedo get off a shot, and Spielberg faltered by replacing FBI rifles with walkie-talkies in the 2002 cut of E.T., and as Harry S. Plinkett observed in his Crystal Skull review, Indiana Jones did not kill enough people in that film as opposed to the less constrained 80s installments. Both versions of the Clone Wars were fun despite the trappings of the prequel era. Rebels was fine and had some fantastic highlights such as Guinness-aged Kenobi fighting Darth Maul. The Mandalorian captures much of the original trilogy spirit, but while Kathleen Kennedy's fingers on the scale of the original trilogy were destructive, it is still worth looking back at the People vs. George Lucas documentary and getting away from the personalities we deify or demonize and seeing that the problem is the integrity of storytelling and in cinema. In 1999, first-generation Star Wars fans pushing 30 were supposedly given something meant for 9-year-olds with Bombad General Jar Jar and stepping into poopy, but also tax issues and blockades kids would not care about and a meandering mess of a strange backstory, immaculate conception, and set pieces. George Lucas could not have continuity with his original grown-up fans when he had little with himself, going from ambitious guy with something to prove, ready to have chest pains from studio pressure, to a guy nobody wants to challenge. There is a paradox of fandom. Knowing all there is to know about a movie or show or creative means knowing the times they seem to have lied or contradicted something or promised a version of one thing that got replaced by something else. There is also alongside of this the impression, which is not likely possible, that someone in power sat around and made a list of IPs from the 80s that appeal to a certain demographic, Bruce, for example, and have set about systematically to destroy these secular religious sects one by one, ostensibly with the intention of broadening their appeal, but in fact exterminating them like Terminator seeds imposed on farmers. Teachers I know who have seen media study courses as the first to disappear from high schools know all too well that questioning of media is something that has to be grassroots. Social media and even the range of YouTube pundits from thoughtful to clickbait seem to be the only pushback against the heavily financed marketing machines. It is maybe okay to stay angry, as Doomcock would say, or maybe it is true, as you say, we might have to question how much we need to know about upcoming entertainment and just catch up on our book reading. Ooh, this is a very interesting letter, William. But I have to say, you're talking about two different things. When I'm talking about Willow Yang, who as a child saw the prequel trilogies, and that was her first experience with Star Wars, that has nothing to do with whether Star Wars, the prequel films, are good films or not. When you're a child, you're a lot less discerning about what you're watching. So, if the first Star Wars movie you ever saw as a kid was Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and you don't know the backstory, because let's face it, Star Wars came out 20 years before Willow Yang first saw The Phantom Menace. Actually, it came out 22 years. Phantom Menace came out 22 years later. I mean, that's a long time. And when I was 10 years old when I first saw Star Wars, and there was nothing that existed before or since like Star Wars that changed the world the way Star Wars did. So I would posit that Star Wars as a piece of storytelling was much better. I think what's really interesting about the prequel trilogy is that George Lucas was a very, very wealthy man who had changed the world when he made that prequel trilogy. He also is out of touch with humanity. You know, when you get to be that rich, that guy, George Lucas, can't go to 7-Eleven and get a Slurpee. So his world had changed. And what was important to him had changed as a creator. Now he has no obligation to us if Star Wars comes out and changes our lives. You know, and when I'm talking about Willow Yang seeing Star Wars, she didn't have any context when, however she was, if she was 5 or 7 or how old she was. What I mean is you cannot tell somebody who as a child has an experience that they loved. They have no backstory. They have no context. All they know is what they've seen and how it affected them at the time. Now, whether that story was good or bad, whether somebody is a sellout or not, it doesn't matter. Just like it doesn't matter when I was a kid first watching Star Trek. I didn't know anything about it. I just loved Star Trek. I found out later it had already made its mark in my psyche and in my brain. So nowadays, the reasons people are making things are different. George Lucas made the Star Wars prequel trilogy to make money. He knew he could. He made a lot of money from those movies. And while I think they're bad movies, I think they're kind of good Star Wars. They're telling a really interesting story. But you're talking about something else. You're talking about questionable behavior from creators themselves and why they're doing what they're doing and what that all means, it's a very different thing than me saying that Willow Yang's experience seeing Star Wars The Phantom Menace when she was a 5-year-old or something. You can't take that away from somebody. And while, you can go back and watch Jason the Argonauts, I think Jason the Argonauts is good, but you have to train yourself in a world where you've grown up post-Jurassic Park that you can even go watch a movie that looks shot with the same film stock. It's a very different thing. And I do think it's something that needs to be remembered. So, I'm not coming out, I'm not trying to defend George Lucas or our corporate overlords by saying that Willow Yang's experience of the prequel trilogy is something other than it's a kid watching a movie. Unfettered. Their enjoyment of Phantom Menace has nothing other than when they turn on the TV or watch a VCR, a cassette, a VHS tape or whatever. You can't take that away from somebody and judge them on it because they think what they think and they know what they know, what's right for them. I am not talking about whether or not the actual product is good or not. I'm just saying that what someone else's response, what someone's experience is, that's all I can talk about. I mean, I can't talk about, anything else. And I think that's really important. And that's why I don't ever want to be one of those people that tells somebody they're wrong for their experience. You can't tell. Look, I believe great art, great movies, great literature are objectively great. I think a person's opinion has nothing to do with it. I think people's opinions have really no bearing on whether art is good or not. I think there is an objectivity to great art. That's why it endures. Can we measure it? I don't know if we can measure it right now. I don't know if we have the way to measure it. But yeah, and right now I'm having extreme difficulties getting into where I want to get into. I'm trying to get onto Twitter because I know people have saved some things for me, saved some super chats that I haven't read, which is monumentally frustrating. So let me see if I can do that. For whatever reason, my internet is being finicky. It is being very, very, very finicky. So I'll try and get on this. Yeah, I don't know. All right, well, listen. I'm going to bring an end to the show. However, if you sent me a super chat today or something I have not read, I will get it, and I'm going to read it tomorrow. This is a weird situation. Well, I don't know what is going on with. Well, hang on. Some people have said things that I can see. Hang on. Let me just refresh and see if I can see people's super chats here. This is very frustrating. I really don't like this. People support the channel and you can't see what they've said. Let's see. Okay. Paul Gilmore sends in a tip and says, "Hey, Rob, now that the Snyder Cut worked..." Oh, wait, I already read that one. Eyes on the Wire sends in a tip and says, "We all know it's not wise to look a gift Snyder Cut in the mouth. That said, let's be thankful Quibi didn't land it." Oh, my God. Can you imagine? Can you imagine how annoying that would have been? Watching the Snyder Cut on Quibi for 4 hours? Wow. Dan V sends in a tip and says, "My biggest disappointment with Snyder's films is the fact that he caused Superman to be thought of so poorly after Batman v Superman, but he had the right mentality for an authority movie. DC is inherently hopeful and optimistic, and I don't get that in his films." Well, I think that what he's giving us is he's trying to make the same way that, I hate to say it, but Star Trek Picard is set in the real world, not our idealized, hopeful future, that they're trying to show what would Superman be like in our world today, and I find that fascinating. Dan V says, "I'm rereading DC's The New Frontier," which I love, which exemplifies DC. I noticed that Lindelof ripped off the John Henry story for his version of Hooded Justice in The Watchmen show. Yes, he did. He's never cited New Frontier, though, in an interview, and it would be a big coincidence. Yeah, I mean, all these guys, all these modern writers are all cribbing, all of them. BL Alley says, "Come on, man. JT Esteban was the captain of the USS JT Esteban was the captain of the USS Grissom." That is true, and you're right. And look what happened to that guy. I like that, BL. That's very funny that you mentioned that. I was thinking that, but I just take people at face value when they send me names that aren't obviously that, because but that's very funny. Magic K sends in a tip and said, "With their announcing the Snyder Cut coming next year, and I'm really curious about how many Snyder cultists will still be around by that time. Will they still blame other people after all this?" No, I don't think they will. But, it's interesting that the Snyder Cut, fans think that they're more powerful or they're more listened to than they really are. They're listened to, but it's not as much as they might think. And hearing about this, hearing how it was Snyder who was called by his agent about this, it was interesting. Mike at Journey's End says, "I think that's similar to how I feel about Ghostbusters 2016. It turned the idea of Ghostbusters into a Ghostbusters-themed SNL sketch rather than selling the reality where these Ghostbusters exist and operate. I guess it all does come down to verisimilitude." You know what, Mike? You're exactly right. As goofy as the first Ghostbusters was, I believed in what they were doing. I believed in them. And Bill Murray was our audience skeptic. Our audience skepticism was led into it by Bill Murray. I didn't believe the Ghostbusters in Ghostbusters 2016. I was actually disappointed that I didn't believe in any of them. They were all movie characters. They weren't characters that existed in any kind of real reality. Claudius sends in a tip and he says, "Hello, did you catch my reading of your letter?" Claudius says, he sends in a tip and says, "1/3 to the collective, 2/3 to Rob. That's why I send wine." And we appreciate your wine, Claudius. You always send very, very good wine. By the way, I want to remind everyone tonight on Whining About Movies, we will be celebrating the 40th anniversary of The Empire Strikes Back. So don't forget about that. Tonight at 8 o'clock, Elizabeth and I are going to discuss The Empire Strikes Back. Apology accepted, Captain Nita. I'm really excited about doing just that. I do not know what is up with YouTube today. I don't know what's going on. What a wacky bunch of stuff. And I honestly don't know why this is all being crazy. I'm trying to get these super chats that even the Richards got for me. What is the problem? I don't know what is going on today. I don't know what is going on today. It's very strange. Very, very odd. But all I can do is go with it. All right, well, since wacky things seem to be happening right now, anybody who's sent in a super chat today, I will get to them first tomorrow morning. I apologize. I will be back. I'm not in the John Campea show tomorrow morning. I'm on Robservations. I have more letters that I did not get to, including letters from people like Ian Samuels, but I will be back tomorrow. I've got some work I have to go do now, but I want to thank you for supporting the channel. What a glorious day for fandom today was. So I congratulations to everybody who waited for this. I can't wait to see what they announce. It's very exciting. And I will be back here tonight with Elizabeth's Whining About Movies episode number 30, where we talk about The Empire Strikes Back, which is amazing. And I want to say thanks to all the moderating staff here. I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank Detective Jim Boyers, his wife Heidi. I want to thank Greg Smith. I want to thank Louis Yu, which I would assume we will see tonight. I want to thank Jordy Lyons, and I want to thank The Richard for running the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page and the Whining About Movies Facebook page and all of that. And by the way, if you were announced as our winner for the JBL Bar 9.1, nobody claimed it. They haven't claimed it. We've sent emails out and all that. And we're going to have to pick another winner tomorrow if no one claims it. So please contact us. Watch the show where we gave it away. And I think that it's really important. And hang on, you know what I should probably do? I think it would probably be a smart thing if I mentioned the name of the winner. Krista Rochelle was the name that we picked, who won the almost $1,000 JBL Bar 9.1 soundbar with Dolby Atmos, which, by the way, it doesn't even come out until May 31st, and it is almost all sold out. So it's going to be tough to get those, at least for a while. So, Krista Rochelle, if you don't contact us within the next 24 hours, we're going to have to pick another winner. I'm sorry. Otherwise, if we don't, they won't be able to have one to give to us. I want to thank Connie at the Harmon International Experiential Engagement Division who made that possible. So, Krista Rochelle, and by the way, we know who you are. We have your email. So no one can just write in and go, I'm Krista Rochelle. We already know. We know. And you would have to know too. That's how we know it's you, Krista Rochelle. But if you don't, I'm going to have another drawing tomorrow on this show for a definitive end to all of that. So I want to remind everyone, I want to thank you all for being here. Thanks for supporting the channel, whether it's monetarily, whether it's with letters, whether it's just with tweeting about or liking these chats. I very much appreciate it. Thank you very much. I don't know why all of a sudden I can't get any of the super chats, but I will get to them tomorrow. And with that, I say, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. I want to invite you all tonight, 8 o'clock, right back here on the Burnettwork, to see Whining About Movies episode number 30, where we talk about The Empire Strikes Back, because tomorrow is the 40th anniversary of the release of Empire Strikes Back. And, hang on, maybe if I can get in here. I'm still trying to get in here. I don't know why I can't. I don't know what is with the internet. One more shot to see if I can read these super chats, but I don't know that I can. I don't know what's going on here. But anyway, I want to thank you all for supporting the channel. And I will say this, as always, as I've said, have a better day. And remember, if you send in a super chat and I didn't read it, I will get back tomorrow to get it. And I have it here. They will not be forgotten. But this is very, very odd and frustrating. I mean, you'd think YouTube does take 30%, and they take 50% of the ad revenue generated by these videos. So we have to work twice as hard. But thanks for being here. Very much appreciate it. I'll see you tomorrow on Robservations, but not on the John Campy Show, and Elizabeth and I will see you here tonight. So this is the end of Robservations, episode number 421.